Hi, Mr. Udell here with either a little preview or a review about congressional representation. For those of you who remember the founding of the Constitution, we had a disagreement between large states and small states. Small states wanted equal representation for every state. That's why we have the Senate of the United States today. So California, with its almost 40 million people, has 2 senators, and Wyoming, with its 500,000 people, has 2 senators. However, in the House of Representatives, the larger states won the concession that they would have more representatives than the smaller states, large and small being here based on population, not on area. So if you go to Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, as we will in class of the Constitution, you will see that there are 3 rules for how members of Congress are handed out to the different states. And those 3 rules are these. First, every state gets at least 1. Second, we will count all the people of the United States every 10 years to determine how many representatives each state will get. And third, there will be no more than 1 representative for every 30,000 residents. So how does this look in real life? In real life, in 1790, was the first time we counted up the people of the United States. We found out that there were about 3.9 million people, with some unusual exceptions in the way that we counted slaves, a black mark on the character of the United States, but nonetheless 3.9 million was the count. If you divide that by 30,000, you get 130 representatives, and that's what we had, 130 representatives in the Second Congress of the United States in 1791. However, if you continued on this trend, by 1900 there were 76.2 million people in the United States. You'd need 2,500 representatives to keep up. And by the year 2010, 307 million or so people in the United States, you'd need a Congress of 10,000 members. Just not possible. So how are we working this out? Because we haven't changed the Constitution. And what you'll notice is that the Constitution does not say 1 representative for every 30,000 people. It says no more than 1 representative per 30,000 people. So what we've done over time is we've ended up stretching that. 1 representative has to represent more than 30,000 people. This first happened in 1929. The number of representatives was frozen at 435. So now when we added new states or more people came, we couldn't simply create more representatives. We had to go through a process called reapportionment. And what reapportionment means is that each state gets a number of representatives based on its portion of the members of its portion of the population. So roughly speaking, if you had, we have portion in there, roughly speaking, if we had 10% of the population, you would get about 43 representatives, or 44, depending on how it broke. So we can no longer just give them away, we now do it as a percentage basis. So this leads to some unusual situations. Here's a couple maps of the United States. We can notice on these maps that, for example, Michigan lost population and it lost representatives. That's not terribly surprising. Sorry if we can fit these on here a little better. Then take a state like Texas. Texas gained population and it gained representatives. Also not surprising. But then take our home state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's population grew somewhere between 0 and 5%, yet we lost a representative in Congress. How can this be? It's a puzzle. And the puzzle be answered this way. If you were to do this quick little quiz, how many representatives for Pennsylvania in this little 2-state country? This is our country of Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, we have 1 million people living in Pennsylvania and 1 million people living in California. And we have 10 members of Congress. So each of them has 50% of the population. Each gets 5 representatives. What happens if by the year 2010 you have 2 million people living in Pennsylvania? How many representatives will they get? Is the answer they still get 5? Will they double to 10? Is there no way to know this? Or is there too little information provided in this? So take a minute and think about that. Pause the video if you want to figure it out on your own. If not, the answer is D. You can't tell as there's too little information. It makes no difference to us how many people live in Pennsylvania on its own. We have to know what percentage of the population Pennsylvania has, and the only way to know that is to reveal the answer is that California has 8 million people. So the answer would now be that Pennsylvania would drop from 5 representatives to 2, and California would increase from 5 to 8, because California now has 80% of the population. So in this map over here, it's not that Pennsylvania is getting smaller, or New York, but they're getting smaller compared to everyone else. Everybody else's population is growing faster than ours, so it makes us look smaller. It's as if you had a friend and you're the same height, you're both 5'10", and you grow 2 inches over the summer, and he grows 6 inches over the summer. Okay, I used to feel pretty good sized, now I feel pretty small. That's the Pennsylvania situation of the world. Okay, the next thing you have to know about the way members are given out in the House of Representatives is yet another new process. And this new process is called, redistricting. And redistricting means that each member of Congress represents a little area of the state. So this particular state that I've given you here has 4 members of Congress, and they have 2 million people living in the country, so to speak, in what I'm calling congressional districts 1, 2, and 3. They also have a city down here in the corner, much like we have Philadelphia. There are 2 million people living in this city, and in that city there are also 2 million people. So we've drawn districts. Congressman A represents here, Congressman B represents here, C, and D. As it turns out, there's something really wrong with this drawing. And if you want to take a minute to look at it and figure it out what's wrong, you can try yourself to envision how it should be redrawn down here. So if you want to figure that out on your own, pause the video. If you don't, the basic answer is what's wrong with this district is that up here, the 2 million people living in the countryside are getting 3 members of Congress to speak their will, and the 2 million people living in the city are only getting 1 member of Congress to speak their will, and that's considered undemocratic. This leads us to another term, and this term is referred to as malapportionment. Sadly, malapportionment is a little bit of a confusing term, because really what people are talking about when they say malapportionment is they're talking about maldistricting. Right? That's not its real name, but if it helps you to think that way. And maldistricting means you have made bad districts, mal-districts, because there are too many people in one and not enough people in the other. And that was ruled unconstitutional. So I've seen people draw maps a lot of different ways to try and fix this. One way people often fix it is they say, well, why don't you just draw it like this? You could do 1, 2, 3, 4. And you could have congressmen here, 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 and here. And that's certainly better. They're evenly populated. However, that's probably not the best way to draw the districts. I'm going to show you the better way to draw districts, there are a couple of different ways that are better. This is just one of them. Probably it's better to draw the districts like this, to split the city in half, and then on top of that, to split the countryside in half in some way, and have districts 1, 2, 3, and 4. The reason this is probably a better answer is that all of the members of the city are more likely to have something in common, and this congressman can do a better job representing those people. And all the people in a more rural area are likely to have something in common, and therefore they are more likely to be represented in Congress. This man or woman can get on the Agriculture Committee. That makes sense. This woman can get on the Urban Affairs Committee. That makes sense. If my district runs all the way in and out of the city to the country, what committees do I get on? Who am I representing? So far what we've seen, just to be clear, and I'll type this out on the next page, is we've seen several processes. We've seen reapportionment, and that's the process where states get representatives based on population. We've seen districting or redistricting, which is the process where states draw districts for members to represent. So if we only get 1 congressman in our state, no districting. The state is the district. But as soon as you get 2, you have to start drawing lines. And then we know we have malapportionment. And malapportionment is districts with unequal population. So those are the three things we have: reapportionment, redistricting, and malapportionment. But we're not done. Just wait, there's more. So here's a state. And in this state, we're going to say each R is 100,000 Republicans and each D is 100,000 Democrats. Now I'm going to draw the state lines, and I want you to take a look and see if there was anything done that was unfair in terms of what we've learned so far. District 1, District 2, District 3, and District 4. So if you take a look at that district for a minute, see if you think there's anything unfair, and I'm going to tell you right now, most people are tempted to say it is unfair. And the reason they're going to say it's unfair is if you look at this, if we think of Republicans as red, the Republicans will win the election here because there's 1, 2, 3 Republicans. But the problem is, or what people might see as a problem, this district has 2 Democrats, this district has 2 Democrats, and this district has 2 Democrats. So even though there are 6 Democrats in the state and 6 Republicans, we've now had 3 Democrats and only 1 Republican. That looks unfair, but it's not malapportionment. It's not malapportionment because in each district here, we have 1, 2, 3 letters. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we've put 300,000 people in each district. This has a totally different name, and the name of this is called gerrymandering, which is the process of redistricting for partisan purposes. And partisan means for one party over the other. So that's gerrymandering. It's a type of districting for partisan purposes. So the people who drew this line were clearly Democrats because they wanted the Democrats to send 3 members to Congress and the Republicans to only send 1. Right? There are all sorts of ways of doing this. We could do the same thing to benefit the Republicans in the state. I could come along and say 1. Oh, this is going to be awkward because of the way I've drawn it, but I can make it work. Whoops. 2. So this is District A, B, C, and D. And once again, I have a Democratic victory now up here in the corner, but I have a Republican victory here, a Republican victory here, and a Republican victory there. Like I said, that was awkward. There's probably a better way to do it, but you get the idea. Gerrymandering has not been ruled unconstitutional. The courts have, in a 5-4 decision, upheld the right of the state to draw the congressional districts any way they want to. Here are some maps that will give you some idea of exactly how ridiculous gerrymandering has got. So here's a map of Pennsylvania. This yellow shape here, whoops, sorry about that. This yellow shape here called PA7, this is all one district. Look how crazy this gets. Right, so it starts all the way over here in Springhouse and Lansdale, comes down this little teeny stretch. I don't even know if we can zoom in and see how little that stretch is. It's barely even blown up to this size, big enough to fit there. Down through Wayne and Havertown and Upper Darby, all along Chadds Ford, Kennett Square, which it misses, by the way. Notice Kennett Square is drawn out. Goes not quite to Downingtown, around Coatesville and around Parksburg, Cochranville, and all the way out into Lancaster County, all the way almost to Quarryville. And then all the way back up here into this. Nobody drew this district by accident. Obviously somebody had a partisan purpose in mind for this. Here are Pennsylvania's old districts. Oh no, those are the same ones. Here are their old districts, which in some ways are equally ridiculous. Look at this crazy district over here, near Pittsburgh. This was the 12th district, this all sort of brownish purple color. The 18th district, this ridiculous green color. Right, and look at this if you zoom way in here, how silly this gets. Just right there, it's hard to see. But it's this little island of green amid the sea of purple. This is an island of purple amid the